Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Are You Determined to Grow? Today is September the 22nd of 2019, and we're going to be talking about the Sunday school lesson. It's been a minute since I've been able to get on here, but the lesson itself was so powerful. I just had to share the revelations that the Lord had given to me. The title of the lesson, I have three titles. We're doing some different things, so we have two titles. The unit lesson for the Sunday school is God is faithful, and we both know that God is faithful. We know that God is an awesome God and that He never fails, even when we sometimes don't remember or we fail in giving Him honor and glory, or even when we fail in our task to the Lord. Okay, so the second title of the lesson is God Hears Our Cry. And so we know that there are times when we are in situations and troubles and we cry out to God and He answers us and He hears us. And that is an awesome thing. So we're going to be talking about that, and I'm trying my best to try to keep under 30 minutes. It's going to be very difficult because there's a lot of good in the lesson. So I'll just give you what I have. The last title is that we don't believe you. Now that by itself is something, and we're going to talk about that. So I'm not going to brief you on that one. The devotional reading is coming from Psalms 106, verses 1 through 12, and verse 48. The background scriptures is coming from Numbers, the 13th chapter, all of the 13th chapter through 14 and verse 10. The printed text is just coming from Numbers, the 13th chapter, verses 1 through 2, verse 17a, verse 25 through 28a, chapter 14, 1 through 2, and verses 5 through 10. The key verse is Numbers 14 and 8. Okay, so first thing I want to do is to expose the title. And so we don't believe you. Okay, so the first thing I thought about, and I know you guys are going to say, really, Francis, really, Denise, is that what you thought about? The first thing I thought about was the fable of the little boy that cried wolf. How many times he called wolf, and the people came running to help him and to protect him or, save him, and it never happened. And so that was the first thing I thought of. And so I thought about, what are the reasons that we don't believe? What are some reasons why it's difficult to believe people, or it's difficult to believe situations? Well, I came up with three little things that I thought would be good reasons not to believe. So the first one is that they told stories in the past, or they lied in the past. And so this leaves room for doubt. And then we don't, are not sure about the integrity of the person. And then, of course, I had to think about my own self, because there are some times when I have hidden things from my husband, and this is when I was younger in the faith, and I just didn't want to hear what he had to say about whatever it was, whether it was a late bill, or whether it was I bought an extra pair of shoes, or whatever it was. So I would hide it from him, which is in essence a lie. Or I've actually lied. Yes, I did repent afterwards, and when it finally came to the light, of course, I asked for forgiveness and all of those things. But I did. I actually told a story. So there's times when things come in and he'll ask questions, because there's that doubt in there whether or not I'm going to actually tell him the truth. But I don't lie anymore, and I just tell the truth. I do my best. Nobody's perfect. And so one reason that people don't believe is that, or believe in you or believe in other people, is because they have lied in the past and they found you out. And so that puts a doubt in their mind. So the second reason that a lot of times people don't believe is because they have proof and evidence that you're lying. I shouldn't say that. But anyway, it's my channel. I can do that. Okay, so, like say for instance, the sky is falling. But you'll look up and you say, okay, the sky's not really falling. So there's your evidence that it was a false truth, that it wasn't true, it was a lie. And so when you have proof of a person that tells stories all the time or that lies a lot, then it's, difficult to really believe it. It's like you're not really sure if you can believe them or not. And it puts doubt in your mind when it comes to that person. I'm not going to call anybody out, but I have people in my life that they lie all the time. And you be like, really? I didn't even ask you for that lie. You didn't even have to tell it. So anyway, let's move on. I ain't calling nobody out. So the other thing is that makes it hard for people to believe is that it just seems impossible. And sometimes things that are really too hard to believe really are too hard to believe. And so it's hard for us to fathom or to believe or to think that this thing can actually happen. And a lot of times, sometimes it's true that it can't happen. Definitely a lot of things that God does in his own power and authority and strength is that he makes things happen that you just don't believe. It's like impossible. And so that's another reason. Those are the three reasons that I think that people have difficulty believing. One, that you've lied in the past. Two, is that you have proof that they have lied or that they are lying. And then the other one is that sometimes things are just too good to be true or impossible to believe. So I have a question. Question is, does God fit into any of those categories? Has he ever lied to you? Do you have proof that he lied? Is it impossible? Now, that was the one I was kind of like, yeah, sometimes he does stuff that's really impossible. But that's what he does. He does those things. So since God doesn't fit into those categories, why is it so difficult for us to believe God and believe what God is saying and believe that God is going to do what he said he's going to do? Well, three things that I want to share with you, and I want to remind you that when God tells you something, he is going to do what he said he's going to do. One, he makes a way out of no way. In Isaiah 42:16, it says exactly that God will make a way out of no way. And then God never leaves us nor forsakes us. And so he wouldn't tell us a lie because there's a concern that our comfort level with him will disappear. And so, but God said that he would never leave me nor forsake me. He will never leave me nor forsake me, which means he won't lie to me. He won't tell me things that are not going to come to pass, the things that are not true. The third thing that you have to put God in the category, and you think about it when you think about God, is that his word does not return back to him void. In other words, when he tells you something and he says to do something, that word is going to come back. It's going to be prosperous in the where it goes, and it's going to be prosperous when it comes back to him. It doesn't return void. And you can find that in Isaiah 55:11. Okay, so I'm almost halfway done with my time, so I got to kind of rush through the lesson just a little bit because I know that we all have things that are going on. But I just want to share these revelations because they just seem profound to me. Y'all might think, okay, I already knew that. I already knew that, Denise. You didn't have to tell me that. But anyway, so let's move on. So let me expose the lesson. This is the Numbers 13 and 14, the ones scriptures already told you. So in verse 1 and 2, God tells Moses to send spies out to see the land. Two things stuck out to me in these two scriptures. One, why spies? Two, why leaders? Because he told them he wanted them to send leaders out. And this is what I got out of that. I believe that God knew his people. He knew that they had to see it to believe it. And this is not faith, by the way. Let me say that. Faith is believing in something without the visible evidence of it. Faith is believing in something before it ever produces. When you put a seed in the ground that is supposed to be a tree, you really don't see that tree until it actually comes forth, right? But you believe it's a tree because this is what the package said before you planted it, right? Well, let me tell you about the package of God. God is a package. He is a seed. He gives us seeds all the time. And seeds, whatever seed he gives you, it will grow. It will come to pass. The second thing, why leaders? And God just shared it with me. Leaders think differently than sheep. They think about all of the troubles, all of the things that's getting ready to happen. They think about how you're going to be fed, what road you're going to travel. Leaders think ahead of the game. Where sheep, they just eat and they just keep going. And then when they move to the next state, they sit there and eat there. And so, in other words, leaders think differently. Leaders can be trusted. Leaders in general will speak with authority. And so, of course, in my looking up leaders, I thought of the 10 things, 10 common leadership styles. And so I want to share those with you, and I'm going to try to move a little faster. I don't know if I'm going to make my 30 minutes, but anyway, I'm going to do my best. So there are 10 common leadership styles. One is coaching. And that's where you kind of find someone's strength or their weaknesses, and you try to motivate that person to go toward their strengths and try to increase and help them to alleviate some of their weaknesses. You have a visionary. Those people that drive progress. They usher in periods of time by inspiring the people and encouraging them to do better and higher and to go higher. You have a servant, and this is a person that thinks about people, that have people on their mind first. So what they wanted, they believe that a person's professional and personal life must be fulfilled for them to be more productive. Then you have the autocratic, which is an authoritarian, which we have a lot of that, which is the person that tells you what to do. They're looking for results and efficiency, and that's all. They don't care about the people itself. Then you have the laissez-faire, or the hands-off approach, which is these people are great delegators. You have the democratic, which also kind of is like the autocratic and the laissez-faire together. So basically, they delegate authority. They're really only interested in results and efficiency, and they have the hands-off approach, but they do a lot of delegating. Then you have the pace setters. This is probably the most efficient one because it's all about performance. Did you perform? How did you perform? How well did you perform? How can we get you to perform better? Then you have the transformational ones. This is clear goal setting, making sure you communicate what you desire from the person and then try to get them toward their results. Then you have transactional. You give me something, I'll give you something. If I give you the typewriter, you should be able to write the book. If I give you the goals, then you should, and the ways to get to the goals, or how to it, then you should be able to perform. Transactional. And then you have the bureaucratic, and we don't want to talk about that one, but it has to do with just being rules and procedures. So let's move on down to verse 17. Verse 17 talks about God said God asked Moses to do these things, and then Moses did what God told him to do. So he sent the spies out in verse 17. So in verse 25 through 28, there's a lot of meat there. So I'm going to try my best to move as quickly as I possibly can. I know I keep saying that, but sometimes that word just be so good. It's like, I just don't know. Just like, eating a good steak. I mean, you really want to take your time with eating the steak. And sometimes the steak really, really is good. And that's how the word of God is. It is like to me, I like well done. So it's like a well done steak that just you got to savor every bite. So let's move on to verse 25. Okay, so the spies went out, so they were gone for like 40 days, and then they came back and to give their report. So in verse 25, we see they brought back samples of great fruit, the land is prosperous, let's do it kind of attitude. They have great, large, productive fruit and things there, so this is going to be awesome, let's do it. And then in verse 27, it says that the land flows with milk and honey, which is a sign of prosperity, fruitfulness, productiveness, and there's plenty of it for everybody. And that's what they started out with. But when you're headed to verse 28, you see a change. Okay. And here is where the good report turns and hits a brick wall. Because they say, we can see it. It's that but, the buts in life that stop us in our tracks to say, okay, yes, I got this great thing and I can make this great thing, or I can make this great salary, or I can do this awesome work for the Lord. But how many buts do we have in our lives? We have a lot of buts. And so we have to be careful that we are not allowing the buts of our lives to keep us from doing God's work. Okay, so let's move on. So they say, but Yes, you got all those great things that I said before, all the large fruit. But guess what? All the cities are fortified. And these people are huge. They big. How are we going to overtake them? So they had barriers. Just like we have in life. There are always going to be barriers in our life to keep us from moving forward. There are always going to be something that's going to be in the way. But the great thing about barriers is, you can always get around them. And if you can't, then it wasn't meant for you to do. But God puts up blockers and barriers in certain situations to see how much you really want that thing. Now, when you have some situation or task that you're trying to complete and you really want to get it done, it doesn't matter how many obstacles you come up against. You're going to put forth your best effort to try to get it done. And that's what the children of Israel looked like they weren't about to do, because they had just really given up already. They had already given up before the fight ever begins. So you see, as we move into chapter 14, verses 1 to 3, you see the people begin to cry out. They were defeated before they ever began the fight. They just coming back with the report, and you haven't actually done anything yet. And so they're like already done with it. I ain't going, and mad about it, because why didn't you just let us die in Egypt or in the wilderness? Why you bring us to look at this great and wonderful land and we can't even possess it? And so, of course, the murmuring and complaining, as we know that the children of Israel do and Christians do on a regular basis about what they got to do to get what God is telling them to do. So, these type of people are people that will not make it into the promised land because they do not see what it can offer. They only see the obstacles that are apparent. So they're looking at what they see and not what God is going to bring them through. And so I wanted to share that with you. Before we go into that, I want to tell you, as I was reading that, God was giving me that revelation, the first person I thought about was Muhammad Ali. I know. Muhammad Ali. See, Muhammad Ali had a strategy. Besides, he was a pound for pound a fighter. He was a heavyweight fighter, and he would punch. He could punch, from my understanding. I ain't never fought him, so I don't know. But I just heard. This is what I've been told. So Ali, this is what he did to his opponents. Before he ever gets in the ring, he starts to taunt them. He begins to talk about them. He begins to break them down mentally. Tell them they ain't about nothing. You can't do nothing. Oh, you hit like a sissy. All that stuff that Ali does. So he breaks them down before they ever get in the ring. And so sometimes the enemy puts up blockers to our blessings. Puts up things in front of us to keep us defeated before we ever get there. So Ali defeated his opponents before he ever threw one punch. Don't let that be you. Don't let the enemy talk you out of your blessing. Don't let the enemy steal your blessing from you. Don't let the enemy tell you, you know what? That really looks good. That job really looks good. But I don't know if I can do that job. Or that blessing really looks good. That car really looks nice. But I don't really know if I need all of that. If God said you could have it, then God's going to provide a way for you to get it. So keep in mind, the enemy is out there. He is trying to what? Kill, steal, and to destroy our dreams, our blessings. He's trying to get us to give up before we ever began. So then we're moving on to verses 5 through 10. And see, when the people had already were defeated, even you look in verse 5, you see Moses and Aaron, they almost gave up too. You know, sometimes the crowd can cause you to doubt God. Everybody's saying, no. But there's always going to be somebody in the crowd that says, hey, if the Lord told you to write a book, write it. Those are the people you need to surround yourself with. Now, I'm not saying you need to get those yes people. I'm saying that you need to get somebody in your corner that believes in what God is doing in you and will encourage what God is doing in you. And not always coming with opposition and telling you how you can't do this, that, or the other. It made me think of that song Anthony Brown and Group Therapy has that says, I got that. In other words, one of the parts of the song, he talks about how, they said I couldn't make it. They said it couldn't be done. And he said, then after a while, they would say, there go that one. I didn't take no credit, he says, from where my help come from. I just looked to the hills because that's where God did it. I didn't do it. But I'm just saying, I like to say this. There are times when people will come into your situation or circumstance. Some people are planted in your life to discourage you from doing what God is telling you to do. They planted there. And they doing their job, because there are times when you think to yourself, is this really what God told me to do? If God told you to do it, he's going to give you plans and he's going to give you a way to get it done. Okay, I'm moving on because I got to talk about the rescue. And that's what I call Joshua and Caleb. They came to the rescue. So Joshua and Caleb, they tore their clothes, a sign of surrender. But it wasn't surrendering to the people or surrendering to the crowd. It was a surrender to God because they felt like they had something to say. And so in verse 17, they spoke up. Sometimes you need people in your life that'll speak up and say, hey, it's okay that you couldn't get that far. It's okay that you couldn't do it this way. Maybe you need to rethink it, because if God told you to do it, there is a way. There is a way through God. And so they began to speak up. And Joshua said the obvious. Hey, the land is exceedingly good, he says. And then he says, you focused on the wrong thing. Pretty much. He said, your focus is on the fact that somebody's in my way for me to get my blessing. Really, you should be focused on the blessing. And because you already know that God got your back and that God is going to help you to get there. And so the second thing he says in verse 8, he says, if God delights in us, if God said we can have it, we got to trust what God say. Now, there are people out there that are constantly telling you, did God really tell you that? And guess what? You're going to have them. That's good to have them. It's just not good to believe them, because you got to believe and trust in God. God is the one that's going to make the way out of no way. God is the one that's going to do it for you. All right, so let me move on down. And then he tells them, not only do you got to trust God, don't believe what you heard from them other people. Because see, there was 10 spies that was sent out. 8 of them was talking negatively, talking about they were large, these people are big, the cities are fortified. You only had 2 witnesses that said, oh, we can take them. We got this. Let's move on forward in Jesus. So he tells them, don't rebel against God, because God told us to go into the promised land. Don't you think he'll make a way for us to get through there? Don't fear the people. So he gives them 3 charges. The 3 charges I said. First he tells them don't rebel against God. He said don't worry about the people. Don't fear the people. And I know we have that issue a lot. I've had it in my lifetime when it comes to my Christianity. I'm going to talk about myself. I ain't going to talk about nobody else. And then the third one, he said, trust God. Wow. That right there was enough. If God said that you could have it, if God said that you were going to do it, if God said that you were going to speak to millions, if God said that your conference was going to be the largest conference that's ever been in the world, it's going to happen. Some things take a process. Some things take time. So verse 10, and I'm going to close it out. Verse 10 tells us, the people just had a stony heart. Yeah, they started to pick up stones to try to stone the people. But the glory of the Lord prevails. Because when God has something for you to do, he puts things in your path. Now, it's not easy because the enemy is there trying to defeat you before you ever get started. But he puts things in your path so that encourages you to continue. That one sister that comes and said, you know what, that was awesome. You did a phenomenal job. And then the 8 that said, I don't know what you was thinking, but you got one. You're always going to have one. You had the 10 lepers that in one story it says that one of them came back and he was made whole. Not just cleansed, but made whole. The one. Another story says about the 10 lepers, and 2 of them came back as a witness, and he asked where the rest of them were. Anyway, God always has somebody in your corner, in your path, that will encourage you to continue what God has started in you. You're going to have naysayers. You're going to have those people that are trying to be your barrier to keep you from God's blessings. But listen to God. Trust God, and you'll make it. So the God is faithful is not just about God being faithful, but it's also to remind us we got to believe God. Whose report will you believe? I will believe the report of the Lord, because he's faithful. See, he's faithful to me when I'm not even faithful to him. He did it for me even when I was in my sins, not even thinking about the Lord. But he loved me that much. He cared for me that much. Who do you believe? I believe God. I have to believe God. He's just been too good for me not to. So, I just want to ask you this question. Are you determined to grow? Don't let your obstacles stop you. Just jump over them. If you don't know anything about hurdles, find out. Some things are just a hurdle. Jump over it and keep it moving. God bless you, and you have a blessed Sunday.